India was always looked upon as a country that never participated in any discussions, India was always on the sidelines. And I believe that the Hollywood movie industry and Bollywood is absolutely responsible for this. When an advertisement or a movie wanted to show an uncool person, that uncool person would be wearing a lungi or a dhoti.
Very stereotyping.
It was stereotyping our culture as being extremely boring, extremely backward, and something that is very uncool. After I won my first Grammy Award, when I met Prime Minister Modi, that is when Prime Minister Modi, he sort of inspired me to dedicate my life and my career entirely to this cause, since I'm so passionate about it.
I spoke with a 3-time Grammy winner, Ricky Kej. He has many, many accolades, and I'm sure you can read about him in the description. But the one that stood out for me and appeals to me is the greatness that he has and the humility and kindness that he exudes. We spoke about many things. He's a person who has taken Indian music to great heights and put it on the global map. And not just his music, but music with a message, which is respect the environment. We spoke about his struggles with ADHD, growing up, and even now, and how he powers through it. He had the privilege of listening in to the camaraderie of PM Modi and President Macron in Paris earlier this year. Lots of interesting anecdotes in there for you. He also spoke about how our relationship with music has changed. Earlier it was an experience. Now it's just a click of a button and we move on. And how has those trends really impacted how we consume music, and for how long does it stay with us? Such a pleasure to have you on Pragyaan, Ricky.
Thank you for having me here.
So, I've heard a few conversations about, how you've basically developed your own voice. And, you've often said that being authentic is really crucial to the music. And so I'm really curious to know, over the many years, that you've grown, how have your own personal beliefs developed? And how does that now reflect in your music?
So I guess when it comes to especially making music in India and independent music, because India is predominantly a film market, as they say, when it comes to entertainment. And when I tell people I'm a composer, the first question they ask me is which film, So that's how deeply integrated the music industry is with the film industry. So I believe that, if you're an independent musician, then most people crave for international recognition because it's very rare that you get recognition from within your own country. If you look at most of the greats, like Pandit Vishwa Mohan Bhatt, or rather, if you look at Pandit Ravi Shankar, he ended up moving abroad, because he felt that he got more recognition for his music, or he felt that, more people respected his music outside of India than in India. If you look at Anushka, if you look at Ustad Zakir Hussain, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, Ustad Allah Rakha, all of them ended up, moving abroad and basing their career more and more outside of India than in India. So I believe that, but at the same time in India, when there is an independent musician, especially a younger musician, they feel that in order to get international recognition, the only way for them to do that is to perform English music or to perform Western forms of music, Western forms of hip hop or pop or all of that stuff. Whereas that is not the case at all, because of the examples that I just mentioned to you, that the people who have actually gotten international recognition from India are people who stayed true to their roots. People who actually dug deep into their own roots and they figured out what is it that makes them uniquely Indian. And they created music based on that,
For the world.
For the world to listen to. And the world loves them simply because they were authentic. And people love artists who are authentic to themselves and artists who are creating music based on their own sensibilities rather than trying to understand or trying to shoot in the dark as to what somebody else would like to listen to. So that is something that I realized at a very young age. At a very young age, I remember watching a Pandit Ravi Shankar concert, who's been one of the greatest inspirations in my life. And I remember watching his concert in the Bay Area. And while I was watching his concert, what really struck me was that this gentleman is playing pure Indian classical music and pure traditional music. And the audience is extremely varied and extremely diverse. It's not just the Indian diaspora that showed up there, like what happens normally at a Bollywood show when it happens outside of India.
True.
But the demographic of the audience inside that theater were very representative of the demographic of the city itself. So I realized that he has broken cultural barriers. He's truly broken cultural barriers, playing music that is purely Indian. just because everybody felt that he was authentic to himself and he was playing something that was pure, not just pure from an instrument perspective or from a Hindustani classical perspective, but pure as in music that was coming truly from his heart.
Yeah.
And he was connecting with the audience. So that's what I decided that that's exactly what I want to do. I want to connect with the audiences and I want to break cultural barriers through my music.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I think you've been doing that and you've got immense amount of international recognition, 3 Grammys, just because I think your music resonates, across cultures. And I also recall you talking about an anecdote where you created music and collaborated with someone where the other person didn't know English at all.
Correct.
And you started to talk and then just magic happened, right? And please tell me a little bit about that anecdote, but I'd like to know much more where you have seen now in your career where sometimes the connections you're making while you're making music is far superior than anything else that you can do through verbal communication.
Yeah, definitely, because music is a beautiful language for communication. And the anecdote that you mentioned was that I was creating this album in 2016, or it was 2015 actually. And there was this Algerian violin player who I absolutely loved, and I thought that he's a brilliant musician. And I wanted to collaborate with him. So I went to Algeria and I sat with him in the studio. And we could not communicate with each other because the only language he knew was Arabic. And the only language that I know is English and bits and pieces of Hindi. And so I barely can speak any other language. And, and I was finding it very difficult to communicate with him. And for a person like him, living in Algeria, even communicating through sign language becomes really, really, difficult because our communication points and our reference points itself is very different.
Very true, yeah.
So communication becomes really difficult. And it became a very frustrating experience where I was not able to communicate what the meaning of the song was or what I wanted to achieve through the song. But then what happened was that towards the end of that recording session, I just started playing something on the piano. And then he just opened up his violin case, pulled out his violin and started playing along with me. And then we just hit the record button and we did that for about 2 hours.
Wow.
And it was quite amazing actually that how he was responding to my music. And I did not have to explain anything about the emotions to him. He was just responding to whatever I was playing, and he was responding in the exact same emotion that I had while I was playing the music.
Yeah.
So I really got through this person when we were divided through language barriers, through political barriers, through reference barriers, through communication barriers, but just music, music got us through. And that happens time and again, actually, especially with musical forms that are more which have a lot of improvisation in it. Like, for example, when it comes to Western classical music, everything is always written on a sheet.
Yeah.
And everybody look at the sheet and they play whatever they want to play. I mean, whatever they have to play. And that's how an orchestra works, that everybody comes together in harmony because everybody has got a part to play in this whole ensemble of an orchestra. And so Western classical music is all about discipline. It's all about reading what's on a sheet, and it's all about interpreting what is on the sheet and interpreting the ancient great composers and things like that. But when it comes to Indian classical music, whether it's Carnatic classical music or Hindustani, or if you look at jazz music, or if you look at any kind of ancient cultural form of music, it has always been about expressing yourself and and improvising as much as possible. So much so that a musician cannot play the same thing twice. Like, I collaborate with Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt very often, and we've done lots of concerts all over the world together. And with him, he never plays the exact same thing twice at a concert.
That's
like, there is a solo piece that he has to play, let's say a 32 bar piece, like let's say a 2-minute solo that he has to play. And, I'm on my keyboards and he's usually sitting right in front of me, like, facing the audience. He's usually seated over there. And, and when it's time for his solo, it's almost like, that I'm playing something very minimalist because I just want to see what he's going to come up with right now and how he's going to wow me. So I become almost like a member of the audience. And he knows that's what happens, and he plays something special every time because he knows that, that I'm going to compliment him on it at the end of the session, so that's how it is. And that's why I love performing with Indian classical musicians.
Well, that's a very special relationship, no? I mean, he almost knows and understands that his role also in collaborating with you is to push himself and really create that wow moment every time. So
just to get me smile,
Yeah.
He loves getting me to smile during those moments. So that's what happens.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's also, I think, speaks to a great friendship. I'm sure you've collaborated many times together.
It's of course. I mean, that I would love to call it a friendship, but it's more about the tremendous respect from my side to him, So it's about me treating him like a guru. But of course, there is a lot of friendship within all of that.
So, you touched upon very interesting things. One is, I think, just the foundation of our Indian classical music is a lot around freedom. I think that's what I heard you say.
Correct.
Which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing is you did something very special. You spoke about an orchestra, and recently you were in London, at an iconic studio and an iconic Philharmonic where you brought everyone together. Tell me a little bit more about that experience, because when I heard the music, I was totally blown away.
So when it comes to an orchestra itself, I do love performing with orchestras too. So I've performed with orchestras all over the world, and some of the best orchestras all over the world. And one thing that happens whenever I conduct an orchestra, whenever I record an orchestra, is that what really mesmerizes me is that it's got all these different instruments, an orchestra. Like, for example, you've got a violin, which is a very soft instrument. And then you've got a tuba, which is a very, very loud instrument. Then you've got a harp, which is, again, a very soft and melodic instrument. Then you've got a timpani, which is like a percussion instrument, which is super loud. And then you've got a bassoon, you've got French horns, which are very loud. Then you've got pianos, you've got all of that instruments. Now, every instrument maintains their own unique personality. A violin is never trying to be a tuba. A tuba is never trying to be a trumpet. A trumpet is never trying to be a timpani. A timpani is never trying to be a harp. A violin is a violin. It maintains its own unique personality. Same thing with the harp. Same thing with all these other instruments. But somehow when everybody come together, they play in beautiful harmony, and it somehow works, that all the instruments come together beautifully, and all of them sound as one. They sound as a beautiful collective. So that is what always reminds me of our country, India. Because India, if you look at it, we've got so much of diversity when it comes to religions, when it comes to ethnicities, when it comes to cultures, when it comes to culinary preferences, languages, all of that stuff. You drive 300 kilometers in any direction, you're going to find a completely different language, completely different food, completely different behaviors of our citizens and all of that stuff. But somehow the whole country comes together as one, somehow it comes together in beautiful harmony.
Yes.
And nobody needs to follow anybody. Everybody needs to maintain their own ideology, their own thoughts, their own philosophies, but somehow everything comes together. So that is why I wanted to record our Indian National Anthem with an orchestra. And my favorite orchestra in the whole world is the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I've collaborated with them multiple times, got in touch with them. I told them that let's do it with 100 members. Normally an orchestra has 75 to 80 members. So this time it was 100. Abbey Road Studios, the place where we recorded, is the only studio that can actually accommodate the 100 musicians. So we recorded over there. And they've also not recorded 100 musicians for a very, very long time till then. So they were quite excited about it. And so then I conducted the orchestra, and it was 3 months of preparation of writing all of the scores on the sheet so that we could tell every member as to what they had to play. And then the recording itself took an hour because the anthem is just about a minute. Actually, it's 53 seconds.
Yeah.
And even though we rehearsed it about 15 times, it was just 15 minutes. And then after that, we recorded it another 15 times. That was again 15 minutes. So it took about an hour for us to record it. And it was amazing. And of course, there was a lot of subtext over there because at the end of the day, the British ruled us for over 200 years. And we were not allowed to sing the national anthem. We were not allowed to hoist the Indian national flag. And now an Indian composer conducting 100 of their finest musicians at their most iconic studio and performing the Indian national anthem, that also gave me a high. I cannot deny that.
For sure. I think, there's, I'm almost getting a vicarious pleasure, right? It's just like, you got the high. I think all of us sitting here listening also felt the same amount of patriotism when, at least, when I saw how that came out. It's just absolutely spectacular, how you can resonate with it. And these are all people, like you said, firstly, not them, but their earlier generations were ruling us, but how they have played it with so much commitment. I think each
Correct.
one of them have...
I'd actually mentioned to them before the performance. I actually I actually gave them a short speech, like, to sort of motivate them. So I told him that this is the largest symphony orchestra to ever record the Indian National Anthem, and this is an amazing gift that they can give to 1.4 billion Indians. And I also told them that, that after you guys have ruled us for over 200 years, you owe this to us,
Payback time.
So they of course laughed it off, but there was a lot of meaning. They felt a lot of meaning in this because, as I said, I've recorded with them in the past and I've collaborated with them in the past, and I did not find this kind of energy ever before. They really, really wanted to give it their best.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
You also have shared publicly about, this conversation which you had with Prime Minister Modi at one point, and, you said that the conversation you had has impacted your music deeply
Hugely.
since then.
Yep.
I would like to know a little bit about that conversation and also how you've seen that, because this was sometime in 2015, if I'm not
Exactly.
mistaken. So now, it's been about 8 years almost
Correct.
since that. And if you could just pick out moments where you have sort of reminded yourself of that conversation and then pivoted away from maybe what you were thinking of doing.
So I've always been two things in my life. I've always been an environmentalist and I've always been a musician. So two pillars that have dictated everything that I've done, every single life decision that I've ever made. Now, so when I became a professional musician at the age of about 18, 19, that is when, I was making a lot of commercial music for television and radio and all of that stuff. And I was also making music on the environment, but not all of my music reflected it. And to be honest, I wasn't even living the life. During those days, I had 3 cars and, all of that stuff. Even though I was an environmentalist, I like to enjoy life. And some of that enjoyment meant it was not in collaboration with the environment, but sometimes going against the environment. Then what happened was that in 2015, after I won my first Grammy Award, when I met Prime Minister Modi, so I was told that it's going to be a 5-minute photo op, but it ended up being almost an hour-long discussion where we discussed a lot about our philosophies on the environment. He told me that he was going to be going for the climate change conference in Paris later on that year. And he told me what he was going to be saying in his speech over there. And, so it was a very, very interesting conversation. And that is when Prime Minister Modi, he sort of inspired me that, to lead the life and to, and to dedicate my life and my career entirely to this cause since I'm so passionate about it. So I took that very seriously when I left his office. And I thought that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lead the life, and I'm going to ensure that every single piece of music that comes off my head or, comes out of my studio, comes off my fingers is going to be about the environment or positive social impact around those areas. So that is
something meaningful, basically. You want to make sure
something meaningful and something that I want to express myself about. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to all the environmental issues that we face today, it cannot be taken in isolation because everything is interrelated.
Yeah.
I believe that in India especially, or in any country in the global south, there are only 2 kinds of problems. There's a problem of survival and there's a problem of thriving. That's all. And environment and climate change, climate action, all of these things in a developing nation or a nation in the global south is always looked upon as more of a problem of thriving.
Yes.
Whereas problems of survival are more immediate issues like poverty, hunger, malnutrition, education, water, sanitation, gender inequality, gender violence. These are things that are looked upon as more immediate problems and rightly so.
True.
But the environment also is a problem of survival when it comes to climate change especially. It's the biggest existential threat we've ever faced. But it's not looked upon as that way because the effects of climate change are not immediate, especially in our country. And we look at things that are more immediate like health and things like that. So that is why in order to get people to buy into the whole climate issues and all of that stuff, one has to have a very holistic view towards problem solving. And that's what I've made my mission, that it has to be a very holistic view and a very realistic view. Because you cannot leave people behind. Everybody's got their dreams. Everybody's got their aspirations. So we have to have a very realistic view towards development and developing as sustainably as possible.
No, you touched upon some really important issues. And I think the first thing I want to get into is just exactly what you said, where a lot of us always feel that the change that needs to happen to be environmentally sustainable is something that my neighbor needs to do. Because I'm, of course, leading the perfect life, right?
Exactly.
So, what are maybe some of the changes you made personally? And also if you can share what that journey was like. Because I think a lot of us are wanting to make those changes, but one, we don't know where can we find those sustainable, choices. And also, it's always looked upon as something which is extremely expensive to do. That if you want to lead a sustainable life is something which is for the privileged. Not every average human being can do that, though I think it's changing. So I'd love to just get your perspective on it.
So there are 4 things that I follow in my life. So I can name them and quickly tell you about each of them. So one is that I don't subscribe to fast fashion. The fashion industry itself is quite a polluting industry. We've not sensitized ourselves to the fiber we wear. For example, if one were to buy a pair of jeans or cotton pants like what I'm wearing right now, it takes about between 14 to 15 cotton plants to make a cotton pant. We have to go all the way to how it is made. It's about 14 to 15 cotton plants. So it takes a large area of land, which could be used to grow food. It could be used for many, many other purposes. But it takes a large area of land to grow those 14 cotton plants. And then after that, you have to water it continuously. It takes 150 days to harvest. So that's almost 5 months it takes to harvest. And then, so that's the amount of water that goes into it. And then after that, it's plucked and then it's sent to a completely different country with a large carbon footprint because it's transported to a completely different country for processing. Then after that, weaving to another country, dyeing to another country, and then manufacturing to another country, and then sent to lots of countries for sale. So basically, the water footprint, leave aside the carbon footprint, the water footprint of a single pair of cotton pants is said to be 8,000 liters of water. So that's the amount of water. And imagine that's the amount of water you'll save if you just don't buy one pair of jeans or one pair of cotton pants. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with t-shirts. T-shirts are said to be between 3,000 to 4,000 liters of water. So the thing is that, as I said, we need to sensitize ourselves to the fiber that we wear, and we need to rewear our clothes. Now, there are a lot of sustainable choices when it comes to fashion, but I do not believe in that because the reason being that those sustainable choices, maybe they are slightly more biodegradable than other choices, but you're still consuming your fiber.
True.
So the water footprint still remains. The carbon footprint still remains.
Yeah.
So
might be less, but still is there.
It's there. So the solution to it is very simple, that buy good quality clothes and wear them for a very long period of time and rewear your clothes. So I started this hashtag known as Rewear for Earth. Rewear and then the numeric 4 and Earth, where I encourage everybody to double down on this. Like go to events, especially people who are living in cities because we live in bubbles, So go to events, wear the same costume, post it on Instagram and double down on it that, I'm wearing the same costume. I bought a sherwani for my, when I won the Grammy Award earlier this year in February.
Yes.
And it was a cream sherwani. And since the time I won that Grammy, I've worn that sherwani for over 50 concerts. So that is the way it is, And so basically double down on it. Kate Middleton does it all the time.
Yes.
She's basically the future queen of England. And she constantly rewears her clothes.
Yes.
And she doubles down on it. So that's what we all need to do. Then the second thing is basically I do not own a car now. So at one point in time, I used to own 3 cars.
That's huge.
Now I don't own a car. And so basically, because I realized that, that I used to use public transportation whenever I would leave the city and I would go abroad or whatever. Why can't I learn that in my own city? And when there's a critical mass of people who use public transportation will automatically improve. And also, again, this is a problem in the global south where people feel that if they've bought a car, then they cannot move backwards. That you cannot go to a cycle.
Yes.
Cycle is like for the underprivileged.
It's lowering your status,
It's lowering your status. And then, like for example, my father, he uses the bus all the time. And he's a Marwadi, so, he's a Kanjus guy. So
different values.
Even though he's wealthy. No, but it's also about the environment that he does that. So he uses the buses all the time. And my mom's a Punjabi on the other hand, and she's the biggest show off you can imagine on this planet, Like
Polar opposites.
Her name is Pammi, so you can imagine, okay?
Okay.
So the thing is that sometimes a friend of hers sees my father getting into a bus, and she tells my mom that, Pammi, I saw your husband getting into a bus. My mom comes home and she throws a fit. How can you do this to me? How can you go in a bus? My friend saw you going in a bus. They think we do not have any money. So that is the problem with public transportation right now, And so basically that, I do not own a car. The third thing is that I get my carbon footprint audited every quarter, just like how people get their finances audited. and I have a meeting as to how we can reduce that carbon footprint, because it cannot go to zero simply because of the way we've built our systems around us. But we figure out ways to reduce the carbon footprint, and to keep my mind at ease, I mitigate my carbon footprint through tree plantations and through investment in renewable energy startups.
Okay.
I do not believe that that mitigating, carbon footprint is in any way good for the environment, but it keeps our mind at ease. The best way to do this is to reduce your carbon footprint to the minimum possible. And the last thing is that I eat a meat-free diet. I'm an aspiring vegan. But I've not been able to get there because of my traveling and all of that stuff, and because of my hectic schedule. So basically, I'm 100% vegetarian, but I'm an aspiring vegan. But of course, when it comes to meat, I believe that is a very, very personal choice, simply because there are a lot of cultural implications, a lot of nutritional implications. So this should never be forced on anybody. Nobody should be shamed for being a vegetarian, being a non-vegetarian. It's just a personal decision that everybody has to make, looking at the effects of this. And lastly, one last thing that I'd like to mention is that during the pandemic, in spite of me doing all of these things, in the pandemic, I realized something very crazy about myself, is that prior to the pandemic, there used to be somebody who would throw my garbage out, right? I was not sensitized to it. I would not know how much of garbage I'm putting out. I would not know who's picking up the garbage, or how the garbage leaves the home. I had no idea about all of that. Then my staff had to leave during the pandemic. So then I had to pick up the garbage and take it out. And then I learned that there's this truck that comes in every morning at 7:30, and I have to put out my garbage before 7:30, otherwise it's not taken out. And I realized that I'm putting out 2 buckets of garbage every single day. And then I realized this is absolute nonsense. So then I decided that, okay, the way that I'm going to reduce my carbon footprint is that I'm going to reduce my garbage. Because if I can aim to make my garbage into half a bucket, I'm going to make all of these decisions, that I'm not going to buy stuff with a lot of packaging. I'm going to reuse everything. I'm going to think twice before throwing anything. I'm going to upscale stuff. I'm going to reuse stuff. I'm going to have a more circular economy in the way that I deal with stuff. So that is what I did. I worked really hard, and in a month's time, I managed to reduce it to half a bucket. And that's what I've done now. So I guess my advice to people is that try to reduce the amount of garbage you put out. And then that way you will start making a lot of decisions which will be more environmental friendly.
Yeah. No, makes sense. I mean, you just work backwards, right? If you're looking at that outcome, then you will make every other life choice to align with that.
Correct.
I also want to just come back to, other things that you said where, when the conversation you had with Modi ji, he was at that time going to Paris, and it was almost like a full circle where when he was in Paris more recently, you were there as well because you were invited by Macron, and it was great to see you there. Tell me, as India, are we being received differently now around the world? Are we being perceived differently? I'd love to get your views, because you also travel around as a UN ambassador. What are your views on that?
No, definitely we are perceived differently, because in the past, at least I can tell you this through my roles in the UN, that India was always looked upon as a country that never participated in any discussions. India was always on the sidelines, and India would just go with the flow. That's all.
Yeah.
And but then that was not the right way to go about it, because with such a huge population in India, we cannot have just a leader for our country. We need to have a world leader, somebody who really understands geopolitics, and somebody who understands that we need to be a part of all these decisions that are happening in the world. So right now, India has come to a different stage where we are not only participating in these discussions, but we are also taking leadership. And India is looked upon right now as the leader of the global south, and rightly so. Because of our GDP, because of our population, because of the power that we have, the soft power, all of that stuff, we ought to be a leader of the global south, and also we are looked upon as being a third superpower.
Yes.
So all of these things are extremely important for India. And even when I was in Paris for the state dinner organized by President Macron and Brigitte, the thing is that over there also I saw the relationship that Prime Minister Modi had with President Macron. It was a relationship of mutual respect, of friendship. And it was, and since I was seated, and I was very honored to be seated right next to President Macron. So it was me, President Macron, and and Prime Minister Modi. So 3 of us sitting together. So I was very privy to the conversations that they were having, and it was amazing listening to the two leaders speak as to how much of respect they had for each other, the kind of high-level talks they were having, and also the banter also that the two of them had. It was absolutely amazing, and it made me feel that that finally India is coming of age. And now, since India has gotten so much of visibility through this, through geopolitics and through our prime minister visiting various countries and through, through our leadership that we are taking in various international causes. And like, for example, in the G20, we were responsible for the African Union getting a seat on the table. All of these things, and yoga becoming getting an international day by the United Nations and International Year of Millets this year.
Yes.
So all of this stuff, what happens is that this trickles down to the artists for sure. Because people, when they want to know more about a country, they want to know more about the art, the music and all of that stuff.
The history, the heritage.
The heritage, the traditions, the culture, all of that stuff. And I've seen that there is a huge interest in my music because of that. A huge renewed interest in my music because of this. Because suddenly everybody's got tremendous respect for India. And when they've got tremendous respect for India, they get tremendous respect for the art forms and the artists and all of that stuff. And people want to hear more of Indian music in their festivals. People want to hear more of Indian music at their in their concert halls. And, and so there is a little bit of mainstreamization that is happening when it comes to Indian forms of music, which I've not seen happening before. And this is happening because of the visibility overall that India is having in the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, I think there are more conversations where it's a conversation amongst equals as opposed to, a lot of these developed countries, talking at us. I think we're now, we have
talking
a voice.
Down to us, yeah.
Yeah. And we have a sort of a voice on the same table.
Definitely.
Very interesting what you said about how you're having the positive rub-off as well, where you're now representing your music and getting many more opportunities and invited.
100%.
Amazing. Yeah. That's. Is it also you're seeing a lot of curiosity amongst young people around the world? So are many more people DMing you or reaching out to you to figure out where are you playing next? And are you also now becoming like a phenomenon, like how we track maybe Coldplay around the world? Are there many more people sort of really wanting you to come down and play?
So my career is more and more been abroad than than over here. So for me, it has been sort of like a dichotomy in this respect, that I've always had a career outside of India. And then I started, once I won my first Grammy Award, then I started having a career in India. And that has been building up exponentially, which I'm very grateful for, because it's great to be appreciated by your own country. And because right now, just how I was talking about the curiosity and all of that stuff and how people outside of India have been appreciating Indian music and culture, we Indians also have been appreciating our own culture.
For a change.
So that's what's been happening, because previously it was uncool, to play Indian instruments. It was uncool to be an Indian classical musician. Even if you look at advertisements that were made in India, when an advertisement or a movie wanted to show an uncool person, that uncool person would be wearing a lungi or a dhoti, or that uncool person would be playing a sitar or a veena or a harmonium. If somebody had to go, if they had to show like a hero or heroine are in a very boring situation, it would be a Hindustani classical concert.
Very stereotyping.
It was stereotyping our culture as being extremly boring, extremely backward, and something that is very uncool.
Yeah.
Whereas that has changed now. Now you will never see that happening right now, because everybody is now proud of our Indian instruments. We are proud of our Indian musical forms and classical forms, and even our tribal forms. All of that is changing. So that's the reason why I'm getting more accepted over here, and also outside. So as coming back to your question, yes, I do have a set of very loyal fans in Europe and in America, in Canada, in Australia, and all of these places. So whenever I perform in these places, then I'm able to fill up a stadium or I'm able to fill up a concert hall because they are constantly waiting for me to either perform over there, to release some new music, and I see that happening slowly in India too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they also connect with your message, right? I'm sure at some level, because I think there are so many artists who are playing music and we all listen to them. But I think when there's a clear value that an artist brings to their music, and in your case, it's the environment, I think there's a special kind of connection and bond that people tend to build.
It works both ways, actually.
Okay.
That's why a lot of musicians and a lot of actors and actresses, they try not to be associated with a cause, simply because they feel that associating with the cause is a little divisive sometimes, because everything is associated with politics nowadays.
Yeah.
So that is one reason. And the second reason is that they feel that people have got their own worries, which is a valid argument, that people have got their worries. People anyway are leading very difficult lives. And when they come to a concert or when they come to watch a movie, they do not want to be worried even more.
They want to be entertained.
They do not want to be shamed into action, or they do not want to be shamed into the kind of lives shamed about the lives that they're leading, which is irresponsible or whatever. So they just want to go, they just want to be entertained. And I used to, for some time I used to feel that entertainment should not be just for entertainment's sake, There needs to be a message, there needs to be a cause associated to it or whatever. Then I remember watching this episode of Friends, the American sitcom.
Of course.
They had this reunion episode, which came out, I think, last year or the year before that.
Yes.
And I was watching this reunion episode because I'm a fan of the Friends. And I was watching the reunion episode, and they sort of had these video bites from people all over the world speaking about how when they were depressed, they would watch Friends, and how Friends prevented a person from actually committing suicide, or a person who had lost his mother, and basically he would watch Friends, and he would
Perk themselves up.
He would perk them. He would forget his worries, and he would forget his sorrow.
Yeah.
So then you start realizing that entertainment for entertainment's sake also has got its place, and one should not be very idealistic about what entertainment should be. And then after watching that episode is when I started having a newfound respect for a lot of people who are just, entertainers, because they are also serving a very, very important purpose, of entertaining people who need the entertainment in their life,
Yeah, and just a casual laugh.
Just a casual
which
laugh.
is what Friends really was.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think
exactly.
we all go back to it, right? At
And
some
not
point.
at the expense of anybody.
Yeah.
So that's what it was, a casual laugh, which was not at the expense of a kind of people, or at the, so basically, what I'm trying to say is that it
Very
was just
neutral
neutral humor.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you touched upon something very interesting, which is around the impact of even music on mental well-being is huge. I see even many more apps now that are coming up use music as a way to soothe people. Have you also seen that through your music or through your other experiences where you're feeling down and out, and it happens to me often. You listen to some music, it changes your mood, and then you're back out again, almost ready to face the world. But I'm doing it more with I'm generally mentally well. But I know that it has impacted people who are also struggling with very serious issues. Any views that you have on that, or you've seen some change come along?
The music obviously has some sort of an effect on our brains. It has a very profound effect on our well-being and on our mental wellness. But then again, I think the amount of research that needs to go into it has not been done yet. And that is something that I hope to do in the next few years. Because there are two aspects that you have to look at over here. One is that what is the kind of music that gives you as an individual respite? Like, for example, for me, sometimes I'm really stressed and my mind is completely cluttered and I'm not able to think straight. Sometimes what declutters my mind is basically heavy metal music, because I've been listening to heavy metal music since my childhood, and there are lots of artists who I'm a huge fan of.
Right.
And I end up listening to like a Panthera album or a Metallica album or a Megadeth album, one of these heavy metal artists, and that really declutters my brain. Sometimes when I'm driving and I'm really angry, what gives me solace is basically rock music or heavy metal music, and that will probably sound like noise to you.
Yeah.
So that, and then it's the same thing with different forms of music. Like, for example, a folk music from, let's say, from Central Africa. For me, it may sound completely like noise. But for them, it will sound soothing.
Yeah.
So it has to be completely individualized, and there needs to be some sort of brain mapping or whatever done on an individual to figure out what kind of music has what kind of an effect on the person. And on the other hand, I've got a friend who's South African, and I remember we were watching a movie called AI together. It was a Steven Spielberg movie. Mm-hmm. And the whole music the whole film had very ambient music in the background, very soft, which would be considered meditative music that would be on the apps that you mentioned. Mindfulness apps and things like that. And about like 30 or 40 minutes into the movie, he got up and he walked out of the theater because he said that music is really disturbing. I can't handle that music.
Oh, wow.
So that's what. So
it triggered him, right?
It triggered him. So that is what. So everybody has got a different reaction to music. And also the same, if music can have a positive effect on your mind, it can also have a negative effect.
Yeah.
So we cannot play around with having a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to music. It needs to be individualized. And the second thing is how you're listening to the music. Because you could be listening to music on earphones. It could be a bad quality MP3 file, which could disturb you even further.
Yeah.
And also the acoustic environment. If you're listening to it in my studio, like what we are in right now, music will sound good. But that same speaker, if you take it into a bathroom, which has got all this echo and all of that stuff and reverberation, it'll sound terrible in the bathroom. So basically, what kind of an acoustic environment you're listening to it in, what kind of a quality of the digital file that you're listening to the music. Also, if I need to go further, one more thing that I can tell you is that previously we had analog recording for music, and now we have digital. Analog music was in waves, like on cassette tapes, on LPs, on vinyls, on on 8-track cartridges and all of that stuff. It was on quarter-inch tape, not CDs, but quarter-inch tape and all of that stuff. That was all analog, so it was in waves.
Right.
So sometimes the quality wasn't that great because the quality deteriorates the more and more you're listening to analog music, because there is wear and tear of the analog medium that you're actually recording the music on. But nevertheless, it felt very pure, because it's in waves. Whereas nowadays with digital recording, you've got formats like 16-bit, you've got 24-bit, you've got 32-bit float. Now, how these things work is that they've got bits that are recorded, Of course, it sounds pristine and beautiful and clear, and it is forever, the recording. It does not deteriorate the recording, but it's recorded in bits. And your brain is working overtime while you're listening to that music to fill up those bits, because it's not in waves.
Okay.
So the thing is that is why nowadays, if you look at it, what I believe, and this is completely my thoughts, that previously you could listen to music for hours and hours, but and plus songs, you could listen to a song which is about 7 or 8 minutes. But now the standard format of a song is 2 minutes to 3 minutes.
Yes.
Above 3 minutes, nobody's got the attention span. And I believe it is because of this, that our brains feel tired after we listen to music. And we feel that subconsciously, that our brains feel tired after we listen to music. So basically,
because you're constantly active, like you're saying, you're trying to fill that gap as opposed to just relaxing and taking it in.
Your brain is subconsciously filling in those gaps. And because of that, you feel tired when you listen to music. So you cannot listen to music for an extended period of time. And that's why most people fall asleep when they listen to music. So that's the thing, because I believe that because you feel tired. So also the mindfulness and the positive effect of music has to be measured in the medium that you're actually listening to music. That also becomes important. So there's to be enough research done on this before we can say that, okay, music is good for you. Because if music is good for you, it can also be bad for you.
Very interesting. I never knew all of this. Thank you for sharing. No, seriously, because I think a lot of times now today when we are listening, not only listening to music, but like even on scrolling on Instagram or anything, it's again the same dopamine hit that we are constantly looking for. And the reason I also mention this is because it also plays out in the choices in life that we make. We're constantly looking at immediate gratifications.
Absolutely.
And some of the things that you're talking about in terms of the choices that we need to make for a better environment or even a better society are all around delayed gratification.
Exactly. Because in music also, that's what's happened. Previously, the only way for us to listen to music was on radio or on cassettes and all of that stuff. And you could not skip from song to song in a cassette. You had to listen to the whole album. Or you could not fast forward through a song. So once you put a cassette inside, you listen to the whole cassette. Or once you even put a CD inside, you usually listen, even though you can skip songs, you usually listen to the whole thing. Same thing with the vinyls. And on radio, you just listen to what has been curated for you. So if a song has got a long intro or a song takes time for it to grow on you, you would allow it that time to grow on you. And I believe that a song that takes time to grow on you will take a very, very long time for it to leave you. And that's why songs of the past stand the test of time, where people say that now they don't make music like they used to do in like the old music and all of that stuff, because those songs have stood the test of time. Whereas right now with digital music and with Spotify and with YouTube, it's instant gratification, because in the first 5 seconds, if the song does not capture your imagination, then there are multiple alternatives for you to go to. So you just keep skipping. And a song like, let's say, November Rain, a song by Guns N' Roses, which has got like a 2.5-3 minute intro. It's not possible for that song to survive in today's time. If it had released in today's time, it would have gone nowhere. It wouldn't have achieved the legendary status that it did in the past, because people would have just skipped to the next song. They wouldn't have listened to an instrumental intro for over 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is right now. And that's the reason why musicians also are making songs where the hook line appears within the first 5 seconds. Because if they do not do that, the best part of the song does not appear in the first 5 or 10 seconds, then basically you've lost the audience completely. And also, in the past, you would have pride of ownership. You would have music in a physical media. You'd keep it at home. When friends would come home, you would open it up, put it into the player and show them that this is this new band that I discovered or whatever. Whereas right now, let aside an MP3. You don't even want to use up the space on your phone to store an MP3. You just want to stream the music. And that is why music has become very volatile. And today's music will never stand the test of time, because you listen to a piece of music on streaming for about 2 months or 3 months, and after that it is forgotten. And it's forgotten because it's streaming, so it's forgotten, and it's not going to remain in your life like on a shelf or whatever. And secondly, because the music itself is made to be forgotten. It is made for instant gratification, and when something enters your head so quickly, it is going to leave your head that quickly.
Very well said. No, absolutely. It used to be an experience. Yeah, like even now, I have friends who have turntables, and you like go, it's a whole experience.
Correct.
You pull out the old vinyl, you talk about the artist, the music. When did you hear it for the first time?
Look at the inlay card, and you learn more about the artist, you learn more about the song, how it was created, who the musicians were. Now you don't care about that.
Yeah, I mean, if it sounds good, it sticks around.
Correct.
You don't even take a minute to go deeper.
Correct.
Like for me, I'll share an experience where, there's a song called I Took a Pill in Ibiza by Mike Posner. And, every time you heard the song, for me, it was in a lounge or a nightclub and you were dancing to it and you thought it was really peppy song.
Yeah.
And then I actually found out about him. It was a song which he made when he was trying to get off alcohol, get off cocaine, and it's a de-addiction song. It's actually a very sad song. He's talking about his sad journey. And we're all like dancing to it because we've not really made the effort to find out, like you said, who is the artist? Why did he sing it? What is the context? What's the message?
Correct. There are many examples like that where people just listen to a song. Like another example is Run to You by Bryan Adams.
Yes.
So Run to You, every Valentine's Day, you'll see it played everywhere. And then you start reading the lyrics and you see that she's got a heart of gold, but that'll change if she ever found out about you and I. No, she's got a love for me that can never die.
Yes.
But that'll change if she ever found out about you and I. Oh, but her love is cold. It wouldn't hurt her if she didn't know that when it gets too tough, I need to feel your touch. I'm going to run to you. So it's basically about a guy having an affair.
Absolutely. And we're all singing it as the highest romantic song.
Because everybody only listened to the chorus. I want to run to you.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a romantic song.
So, growing up, yes, you're saying, you listen to a lot of rock, a lot of heavy metal. But, so who were your idols when you were growing up? And, who would you look up to in terms of not only music excellence, but also just human values?
Correct. So one I already mentioned, Pandit Ravi Shankar, because of the way he led his life and the way he single-handedly made Indian music popular all over the world, broke cultural barriers. Every time he would collaborate with somebody like, let's say, the Beatles or Madonna or Duran Duran or whichever the artist that he was collaborating with, he was always playing his Hindustani classical music.
Yeah.
It was not like he was playing an electric guitar or, whatever. He was always traditional and he was sticking to his roots. And that's what I loved about him. Then Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, another huge influence. And this was basically a true story when I was in the 6th grade, I think, or the 5th grade. I remember during those days there were Walkmen. And somebody gave me a cassette of Night Song, a particular album that Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan did with this amazing guitar player called Michael Brooks. It was a collaboration between the two of them.
Yes.
So there was a song called Tadim. No lyrics in the song. It just goes Tadim and lots of sargams and all that. A 7-8 minute song. Very, very intense song. And somebody told me, why don't you listen to the song? And I listened to it on my earphones. And I remember I just started having tears come down my eyes. And I was not feeling sad. I was not feeling happy. And I was wondering, what the hell, what is this? And then I started realizing that I was just overwhelmed by this music, It was just extremely an overwhelming experience. And then I realized that, okay, this is the effect that I want to have on other people, And I was already a musician by then. Then there was this other band, another Pakistani band, a band called Junoon. And I remember watching them on television when I was in college. And I'm watching them and I'm like, okay, this singer, Ali Azmat, now they've broken up the band, but Ali Azmat, the singer, I'm like, wow, this guy's got a voice just like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan.
Yeah.
But there is this guitarist who's playing like heavy metal chords, next to, and then there's a tabla player, and then there's a drummer. I'm like, what is this? What kind of music is this, And then I started realizing that this is what fusion music is in its truest form, where you're not trying to make a rock song, you're not trying to make a pop song, you're not trying to make a Sufi song, you're just trying to make a song.
Yeah.
That's all. And whatever connects to you as a musician and whatever connects to the audience, you're just trying to make that and you're trying to put it out. You're not trying to consciously put in notes and scales and rags, or you're just trying to make a song. That's all. And whether you need a Celtic harp in it, or you need to put in a danbao into it, or you need to put a koto into it, or you need to put a harp into it, whatever it is, but just make a good song, a song that connects. And that's what started off my career in in fusion music, because then I started realizing that, okay, the world is my playground. Every single traditional form of music is my playground. Let me use all of this and try to, then I started learning all these different forms of music all over the world and trying to understand these different ideas and these different philosophies behind music. And all of these started getting incorporated into my music.
When you describe all of this to me, it just seems so spiritual, because you're talking a lot about just human values, right? Which is the fact that just be yourself, do what you do that well, and everyone else will just come around you and we'll all collaborate and create magic. So, it's incredible. But when you started to go out and collaborate a lot more in your journey, what were some of the challenges that you faced in terms of just different styles of music, or also, like you said, language, maybe cultural barriers? Anything that you could share will be interesting.
So first, I'll touch upon the spirituality aspect that you mentioned. So I have to confess that I'm a complete and absolute atheist. I do not believe in any form of God in any way, but I'm a cultural Hindu, and a very proud cultural Hindu, because I love the culture of Hinduism. I love I love the Vedas. I love what they stand for. I love the ideas of coexistence. And I love the ideas of respect, and the 5 elements of nature, protection, conservation. All of that stuff is things that I feel very deeply about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, all of these things. But at the same time, I do not pray to a God, because I do not believe in any God. I'm also not at all spiritual, zero spirituality in me, because what I believe is spirituality is that, like, for example, if I were to see a beautiful sunset, or if I were to listen to a spectacular piece of music, like what I mentioned, Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's voice, then sometimes my brain is so primitive that I cannot fully comprehend the beauty of what I'm looking at or what I'm listening to, what I'm experiencing. I cannot understand that beauty. And so my brain is so primitive that I just attribute it to a higher plane or a higher level. And that's what people call spirituality, in my opinion. So for me, a lot of people come to me and they say that, I listened to your music and I had a spiritual experience, or it felt very spiritual. Then I feel that I'm extremely successful, because I've had that overwhelming effect on that person where they could not explain why they're feeling a certain sensation, or why they're feeling the experience that they are having. And so that's what I believe, that every artist should have that so-called spiritual experience on their audiences, or on their fans, or on the consumers of their art. Because that would be the greatest compliment that they would achieve.
Yeah, where you can just transcend, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you've come to Kana Shantivanam and you've interacted with Daji as well. And he always says that, Western philosophy tells us that meditation is to think about the same thing all the time. Whereas if you look at it in Sanskrit, which is dhyana, it is actually to transcend the mind.
Yeah, true.
That is what we are trying to get to.
True.
Yeah.
And then in terms of collaboration, your question. Collaborating is, so let's put it this way, like I make a composition. I compose, since I'm a composer, I make a composition. And then basically I can get all the instrument sounds that I require out of the computer, because technology has reached a stage where I can just play stuff on the keyboard and it translates to another instrument, like a sitar or a veena or a flute or a guitar or a drums or whatever. The sounds, there is no problem with it. You can get any sound. So if I've got a very rigid view towards creation of music, and I know exactly what I want, and I want it to be only that way, and I have that ego that this is the way that the music has to be, then I do not need to collaborate with anybody. I can just get every sound out of the computer and I can release music. And there are a lot of musicians who are very successful doing this. But at the same time, for me, the reason why I love collaborating with musicians, especially musicians who improvise, is that you're not just getting the sound of their violin, let's say, into your music. You're also getting the head into your music.
Yeah.
You're getting their life experiences. You're getting their music education. You're getting their experiences of working with other composers. You're getting all of that, their skill into it. So basically what they will do is that if you give them you give them the tune and you give them the room to improvise, they can take your composition to a whole new level. And they can take your composition into places where you never imagined your composition would go to. And that's what I like, the magic of collaboration, where you just give them the freedom and you encourage them to think out of the box. And then they will bring in all of that stuff into your music. Sometimes they may go a little too far and then you have to rein them in because at the end of the day, it's your vision. But then working with musicians is so beautiful in that way. So there is a little bit of compromise also while working when you're collaborating, because you have to respect their opinions. You have to respect the opinions of the musician you're working with, even though it is your composition.
Yeah.
Sometimes a musician may come up with an idea, and you may feel that this is not the right idea or this is not going with my vision, but you'll have to trust that musician, that this musician is a better musician than me. So maybe this idea is good. And then you'll grow to liking it. And I'll give you an example for that. My Grammy-winning album, that is Divine Tides, it won 2 Grammys in 2022 and 23 this year. So that was a collaboration with Stuart Copeland, who is considered to be the greatest drummer in the history of music, was a drummer and founder of The Police, and sold 75 million copies of his albums. He composed 50 Hollywood movie soundtracks. Won 5 Grammys right up until then. Now it's 7 because he won
He's
2 more
with
with me. So the thing is that he was my childhood idol. I literally grew up with posters of him on my wall and all of that stuff. So when I collaborated with him, I made a decision that up until then I was always in control of my work. So I made a decision that every time he asks me to do something, I'm going to do it irrespective of whether I think it's right or wrong. I'm just going to do whatever he asks me to do. I'm going to surrender and do whatever he asks me to do. I'm going to live with that for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, if I still feel that it is not right, I will voice my opinion. So that's what I thought I'll do. And during the course of the year that we worked on the album, we would keep sending each other work because it is during the pandemic, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I had not even met him in person. But we grew very, very close during that time, with hundreds of phone calls, hundreds of Zoom calls, WhatsApp calls, and remote recording sessions and all of that stuff. So there were numerous times where he would tell me to do something and I would be like, that's not going to work. That's not at all what's going to happen in this particular thing. Or he's mistaken. This time he's definitely mistaken. This time he's gone too far or whatever. And then I would live with it for 2 weeks. And then I would be like, thank God. And I use that phrase, thank God, all the time, even though I'm an atheist. But I would be like, thank God I did not listen to myself, because now that I've lived with it and I've detached myself from my own opinions and I'm looking at it very objectively rather than subjectively. And previously I looked at it at a time when I was falling in love with all of my ideas. And now I'm looking at it from the lens of having lived with this for a while and listened to it for a while, I realized that he was definitely right. And this happened each and every time that he asked me to do something where I felt that. So that gave me a huge lesson in collaborating, that sometimes you just have to surrender yourself to the collaboration. And then, especially if the musician is more skilled than you, you have to surrender to the collaboration and then to the idea. And then you have to live with it for a while. And then you have to realize that, that the reason why you felt that your idea was better was that you were unreasonably falling in love with your own idea, So that was the thing.
No, great lesson. I mean, in every walk of life, I can say even in the corporate world where, sometimes you get so caught up with your own self that you tend to believe that your idea is the best idea. And sometimes just staying quiet and going with the flow allows you to see a different side of yourself.
Absolutely.
And I am hearing that a lot coming out of you, where at different stages in your life, you've tried to redefine your beliefs, push yourself a little bit,
Absolutely.
whether that's mentally or, in your own life choices. Are these things you do consciously, or it's just something that you're so self-aware that it keeps happening to you and that you're constantly tuned into what life and what experiences are telling you that you need to change?
Now, one thing that I've tried not to be my whole life is to be delusional. That is...
Delulu.
So that is something that I've tried my best not to be. Even in the music business, for example, if you look at the music business today, one cannot be just a musician. Of course, you have to be 3 things. One is that you have to be extremely skilled at what you do. That is very important. Second thing is that you have to be an entrepreneur, because at any given point of time, you're trying to sell something, and that something is basically you and your creations. You're always trying to sell that. So you have to be a really good entrepreneur. You have to be really good at presenting your work to the world. And the third thing is that you have to have leadership abilities, because you're working with large teams of people. You're working with filmmakers. You're working with other musicians. You're working with orchestras. You're working with marketing personnel, record labels, all of that stuff, television channels, social media people. So you're working with all of that. So basically you have to have the leadership abilities, because you have to work with these large groups, and you have to showcase your authority sometimes on people, or sometimes you have to show your benevolence, and you have to show your collaborative abilities.
Yeah.
So all of that comes under leadership, in my opinion. So the thing is that, and if you feel that you can just be a musician and, if my music is good, people will listen to me, then basically you're automatically being delusional, because that's not the way that the world works today. And it's the same thing with everything, in the sense falling in love with your own ideas and not trying to grow as a musician. Like, I can tell you one thing very candidly, that I've won 3 Grammy Awards. I've won the most number of Grammy Awards that any living Indian has.
It's incredible.
But it is incredible.
No, and I'm sitting and having this conversation. Sometimes it's like a penny drop moment
No,
for
but
me.
let me come to the butt, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm not delusional, because am I the most talented musician in India? Absolutely not. In fact, in Bangalore, my own hometown, in my own home city, right off the top of my head, without even thinking, I can name 50 musicians who are more talented than me. Like, I can just rattle out their names without even thinking. And these are musicians who I respect. These are musicians who I obviously know as being more talented than me. But at the same time, am I the most hardworking musician? Absolutely yes. And do I know how to apply my music? Or do I know how to create music that connects with people? Yes, I know how to do that. And I probably know how to do that better than other people. So basically, one cannot be delusional. And for me, that is something that I constantly remind myself, and I'm constantly having these reality checks with myself. And of course, I've got a very good feedback mechanism around me of people who are extremely honest with me about my music. And that is very, very important, because I've got a lot of friends who are musicians, and they used to make extremely good music. There are so many filmmakers also.
Yeah.
You and I know about these filmmakers who used to make these amazing artistic movies. And then when you watch their films later on, you're like, is this the same guy who's made this film? Like, it's just shocking, that what happened to them? How did this drop happen,
Yeah.
It's because they've just surrounded themselves with people who just love everything that they do, or at least pretend that they love everything that they do. And the second thing is that they become delusional about the art form itself. They feel that they can now that they've reached a certain stage, they can take shortcuts into creating their art. They do not need to do the pre-production work. They do not need to do the groundwork. They need not do the foundational work. They can just, jam with somebody and create a song, and okay, people will like it.
Yeah.
I've had legends come and tell me that, when I would record with them, that no, people just want to listen to my voice. It's okay. Like, when they've given me a bad take or something like that. I've had legends tell me this, or instrumentalists who are like, right at that top level instrumentalists. They play something and I'm like, can we do another take, because this was a little besura in this place, or, I think we can do something better. No, people just want to listen to me. That's all. So you don't worry, it'll become a hit song or whatever.
My star power is enough.
My star power enough,
Yeah.
or like, people will just eat anything that I do, So people will just consume anything. So that is where, or you have even the younger musicians who say that they show me a song and then I'm like, no, you need a lot more practice. This is definitely not up to the mark. It's not even close to being professional. Then they're like, no, but my mom told me it's amazing, or my grandmom says that, I'm the best musician or whatever. What do you know about music,
Yeah.
So delusion happens everywhere, and you have to constantly have this reality check, and you have to constantly remind yourself that, you have to grow. And at the same time, that you're not the best. You're never the best.
No, I mean, now I know why you are so great. Because now that you're telling me all this is the sign of somebody who is always wanting to evolve and get better. And I agree with you. I mean, I think, I am that person usually in my friends' circle where I think if you're asking me for an opinion, I'm doing a disservice to you if I'm telling you lies.
I sometimes lie to people, but the reason.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, there are two situations.
Okay.
Somebody asks you for an opinion,
Yeah.
at a stage where they can do something about it. So
Yes.
that is where I give honest opinion.
Yes.
But if something has already
Post facto.
been released, or post facto, where they cannot do anything about it,
Yeah.
and you're probably just going to hurt their feelings, then basically I'm probably, and they're not a close friend of mine.
Yeah, of course.
Where they will take something constructively, or rather they'll take it personally.
Yeah.
Then I'll just lie to them,
Yeah.
because you don't want to become their enemy, and
Yeah, and if you're not helping them through the process,
Correct.
then it becomes more like, it pulls their confidence down.
So lie is of course a very powerful word. What I would do is I would find something positive and I would tell them that. So that's what I would do.
But tell me, who was that person for you when you were growing up, right? Because I know your father was like, dude, get your degree, otherwise you ain't going anywhere.
No, my parents were very honest with me.
Yeah.
Very, very honest, and brutally honest.
Yeah.
Because at some point they did not want me to be a musician. So they would be extremely on the other side,
Trying to almost discourage you,
Trying
right?
to almost discourage me. So that was there. So they were very honest with me. My older brother, extremely honest with me. When he would not like something, he would just say that. Then I had a lot of friends who are musicians. So I would always work with musicians who, like even with Stuart Copeland, like, reaching out, like working with musicians who are far better than me. So even while growing up, I would work with musicians who are far better than me, who would have nothing to lose if they would be honest with me. So that is what. So basically.
And so, no, I'll tell you why I'm asking you this is because, that mother and that son who you spoke about is now 90% of the population in our country around most things. Not just music, but I think now we've surrounded ourselves with, I think, your generation of parents or my generation, where the first thing was we need the way we pushed our children towards excellence was by telling them and being honest with them.
Yes.
Now it's the other way around,
no,
right?
Where they're not.
Everyone's dealing with their children as, with kid gloves and, beta, you're the best, right?
Correct,
and so
correct.
What is your really advice to those kids who are sitting in their room thinking, because they have all this equipment, they have all the wherewithal, which you, of course, have worked very hard to achieve, but they've got it on a silver platter, and good for them. But what advice do you have to say to them for them to then benchmark themselves with the best and say, where do I really stand? Because everyone around me is like, you're amazing and you're great. And then you go out there and you're not.
So there are two aspects to this. One is that, of course, I do not have children, and for good reason, because
you're sensible.
Not that too, but more importantly, that these are the questions that would keep me awake at night. What you just said, how do you raise a child? What's the correct way? What's the wrong way? And I do not want to. I do not want to make these wrong decisions unknowingly and ruin somebody's life. So that is one thing. There were many other reasons why I did not want to have children, but there were just way too many reasons not to have children, and there was not a single reason why I should have children. That's why I decided not to have children. And of course, later on, I'm 42 now, but later on in my life, if I feel this fatherly thing, then I can always adopt, because I would rather give a chance to somebody who's living rather than bring somebody new at that stage, at least. So that is that. Second thing is that about children, as you said, they've got all this equipment and everything has been democratized, and you've got social media to reach out to people. You do not have to go through a gatekeeper that is a record label or a radio channel and stuff like that. Everything is free flowing.
Yeah.
I would say that it depends upon what the aspiration of the child is and what their definition of success is. Like, for example, you've got this influencer right now who's doing the rounds, like Ori.
Yes.
So what is his definition of success, right? Yeah. This Ori guy, because he's got like 1 million followers on Instagram. Every single video of his goes into millions of views, like 11 million, 15 million views. He's in the news every day. People are talking about him on television. Now, does he have any set talent in the traditional way? Absolutely not. Like,
No.
at least he's not showcased it till now. Like, that he's got some sort of a major award-winning talent or something like that. But then he's far more successful than most people who have got that traditional talent.
Yeah.
So I guess children today, need to make their own definition of what success is to them, rather than having like a textbook definition of success. And their definition of success will keep varying as and when they are going into that field which they want to go into. Like, I'll give you another example. If you look at the country of America, you have a musician like Chick Corea, who's of course, he's now passed on, but jazz musician, okay? And then you have Beyonce, who's a pop musician. Now, Chick Corea, while he was living, had about 400, 500,000 followers on Instagram. And he's considered to be the greatest jazz musician ever and jazz pianist. And one of the greatest musicians in general, huge inspiration to me. And 24, 25 Grammy Awards,
Wow.
And then you have Beyonce, who's a pop singer, or let's say Taylor Swift, okay,
Yeah.
pop singer. Taylor Swift must be having like maybe about in single digit Grammys or whatever.
Yes.
And but she's extremely popular, Taylor Swift. She has maybe about, I think about maybe more than 100,000 followers on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
So will you go to a Chick Corea or do you think Chick Corea will be sitting down at home and wondering that, why aren't people listening to my music as much as they're listening to, Taylor Swift's music? I am a much better musician than Taylor Swift. I'm I'm the greatest jazz pianist and all of that stuff. Why are people listening to her music, which is just pop and it's just got 4 chords in every song and it's so simplistic music and she's not even that great a singer or whatever? Why do you think Chick Corea would do that? No, because his definition of success is basically reaching out to the audience that listens to jazz music.
Yeah.
He does not want to have that one-size-fits-all approach that I want everybody in America to, or everybody in the world to listen to my music.
Yeah.
He wants to, so for him it is about him digging deep into his own emotions and his own heart and creating a piece of music that he absolutely loves. And then for him, it's about finding like-minded people who like that music and listen to them. I do not want a heavy metal listener. I do not mind that a person who listens to heavy metal does not listen to my music. I don't mind that a Swiftie or whatever you like.
Yes,
Taylor Swift or a BTS person listens to my music. It's fine, you know.
Yeah.
They may listen to my music at a later stage, but I'm all right with it. I'm all right with my small but extremely loyal audience. Whereas the audience that a Taylor Swift gets or a Beyonce gets, you may say that it's a very loyal audience, but it's not as loyal as you may imagine.
Yeah.
Because for them, it's about what is the current trend. And then basically once Taylor Swift, once there is another Taylor Swift that is born, who has another, unique personality or a unique style of music, which is within the pop genre music, everybody will move on to that.
Yeah.
And then they'll move on to the next, and then they'll move on to the next. Whereas Chick Corea has got fans who were his fans when he was in his 20s or 30s, right up to the day he died and beyond.
And those sort of musicians are generational, right?
Correct.
You have fathers listening and they teach their sons or daughters, and people
Exactly.
just keep listening through the family
Exactly.
around that music and develop their sense of music with that.
So that is what. So basically, what is the definition of success? That is what. Chick Corea is as successful as, or maybe even more successful than a Taylor Swift. So what is your definition of success? Or is your definition of success that I'm a Hindustani classical musician and I only want to do kacheris? I only want to do these baitaks to small audiences and I want to perform. No, I don't want to do stadiums. I don't want to do pop music. I don't want to collaborate with the Beatles.
Yeah.
I don't want to collaborate with Michael Jackson or whatever. I want to just do my pure Indian classical music, and that is my definition of success. So basically, that's a small issue in India where people are defining what success is. The audiences say that, like for example, for me, I've got like maybe about 300,000 followers on Instagram. Oh, you've got 3 Grammys. Don't you think you should be having more followers on Instagram? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that this is the number of people who listen to my music.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with it,
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
No, I loved what you said about the kacheri especially,
Yeah.
because, what we also have to believe that when I make that choice, I should be willing to live with the trade-off that comes with it.
Absolutely. And the other stuff should not be tempting to me. If the other stuff is tempting to you, go ahead and do that.
And then it's okay.
Yeah.
Then say, I've changed my
Correct.
mind and I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do the stadiums because
Correct.
that's what I believe.
Because if I'm making music for myself, I'm not going to get an audience like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Whereas Taylor Swift is extremely good at what she does, where she can make music that appeals across demographics. And that is why she has got a one-size-fits-all approach towards making music, where people across generations, people across
ethnicities, cultures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They, all of them, they may be listening to other music, but they also love Taylor Swift's music. So that's the idea. But then again, it follows current trends. But then if you look at art itself, like if you look at a person like Vincent van Gogh, one of the greatest artists, but again, more contemporary artist. So rather than taking an example of Michelangelo or whatever, but if you take a person like Vincent van Gogh, if he was making a new piece of art, I cannot even imagine him going to all the neighboring art galleries and saying that, okay, what is everybody doing? Let me do something similar. Okay, this is in vogue. Let me do something, that kind of a thing.
Or paint half of it and tell the audience, what would you have me do for the second
I
half?
put it on Instagram and say that, what would you like me to do in the second half or whatever?
Yeah.
Or audience tell me, what would you like me to paint or whatever? So he wouldn't do all of that, In fact, he again would dig deep into his soul and he would make a painting that is a representation of his. Now, there's a second aspect to this, that if I wanted to know what kind of a person Vincent van Gogh was, I'm not going to read a book about him.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read his autobiography. I'm just going to look at all his art and I'm going to define that he was like a tormented guy. He had this psychedelic visions. He was like a cool guy to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
And that I'm going to define his personality based on that. But in India, especially because Bollywood and the film industries have got such a huge dominance on the music industry, pretty much every song, not all songs, but pretty much every song that comes out of India is either a love song or an item song. Because everything is a one-size-fits-all approach. Everything is based on the sensibilities of a director or producer or what the audience wants. So that needs to change when it comes to music. Or even if it does not change, musicians who create music based on their own sensibilities should be fine with a smaller audience.
And then be true to themselves and their art and why they're doing it. Because you're right,
Absolutely.
there's always sets of people who are happy to listen to and rather are yearning for that
Correct.
sort of music.
Correct.
No, absolutely. And the item song and the love, you're absolutely right. And there's so much, because I believe in equality and also a lot of other things when it comes to women. A lot of it has misogyny just so deeply rooted in it, right?
And it's quite crazy actually, because sometimes when you go through the lyrics, you start, like for example, I was going to a friend's daughter's annual day function. She must have been in the 4th class. And I went for the annual day function and they were dancing to Sheila Ki Jawani. And of course, and they were. So I was telling my friend, I just leaned to my friend and said that, have you listened to the lyrics to what your daughter is dancing to? And then I'm like, I think I'm feeling that I'm becoming like one of those old people who are talking about these things. And then my friend tells me, no, but she's looking so cute while she's doing it. So I'm like, so basically they've just desensitized themselves to what the art is, and they're just okay with it.
Yeah.
Because it's quite crazy. Sheila Ki Jawani lyrics is about a girl coming of age and, and all of that stuff. And now she's able to go around and now she's able to do stuff. And so it's
wrong
just,
at many levels.
It's just wrong at too many levels.
Yeah. But then just coming back to the music trends that you're seeing today, not only in India, but also globally, are there folks that you feel are, you're looking, I wouldn't say you're looking up to, but have talent, have potential to be great? Not yourself, of course. You're already there. You won 3 Grammys and a lot more journey to go. But I mean, like the newer folks that are coming out of India in terms of artists, are there anyone who you are really tracking and looking out for?
No, I think pretty much all the classical musicians, they're amazing. And I perform with a lot of them. Like, for example, there is Pramad Kiran, who's a percussion player. There is Giridhar Odapa. There is Arun Kumar. There is Manju, BC Manjunath, Vari Jashri Venugopal. All of these artists, they're absolutely amazing. Ravi Chandra Kulur. All of them are amazing artists. They know how to express themselves through their art. In North India, you have Purbayan, who I've recorded with a couple of times. Absolutely amazing. Bikram Ghosh. Rakesh Chaurasia. Yeah, and then, of course, you've got the others.
Also, Niladri Kumar, he's doing some interesting.
Niladri is amazing. Yeah. Niladri is absolutely amazing. Yeah. And then you have, of course, I'm missing out a lot of names. There are so many names that I want to mention. Then you've got the legends also, like people like Shankar Mahadevan, who has been, who took a huge break from his commercial career to actually tour with Shakti. And in the past, he was with a Swedish band called Minta. So he basically does his commercial work, but at the same time, he also does all of this other stuff. And
for his soul.
For his soul. And this is the kind of stuff that, if he does that, he's not going to have like a Maybach pick him up at the airport, and he's not going to
have an airport
promoters. The promoters are not going to are not going to, and then the promoters are not going to put him up in like 7-star hotels and suites and all of that stuff. He's going to have to rough it out, but yet he chooses to do that because he wants to stay true to the art and he wants to explore all forms of the art.
Yeah.
So he's a person I've got tremendous respect to, because in spite of, he could have just, like all the other composers, he could have just stuck to, Bollywood and, stuck to being picked up in Bentleys and Maybachs and all of that stuff, and going into a hotel, being pampered like crazy, and or being paid huge amounts of money for every concert. When he does his concert with Shakti, or he does his concerts with Minta, or these other Hindustani classical concerts that he does, I cannot imagine him being paid like even a fraction of what he's been paid, but he still does that. So that's why I've got huge admiration for him.
No, for sure. You were talking about Taylor Swift, and I recall now when she announced her concert last year, the GDP of the US went up. It's literally that sort of thing. Suddenly people come out and start paying money.
She's hugely popular. One cannot deny that, like massively popular.
Yeah. Coming back to, your environmental issues, and, the COP28 is around the corner. It's going to be in Dubai. A lot of the global leaders who you might have interacted with through your career are all going to be there, hopefully defining what the charter for sustainable growth should look like for many of these countries. But very often, most leaders look at it as, I'm here representing the needs and the sort of the aspirations of my country.
Yeah.
And we sometimes tend to miss, the global collective good that we need to achieve. And the classic example is, even last year, I remember there was a meme where they showed how all of these people, all of the ministers and the various people flew into the city, all in their jet and their private jets, and the carbon footprint they had was huge. So it's like ironic. You're flying in to talk about creating a sustainable world, and you're creating huge footprints that even most average populations of cities don't create. So what do you think will be a good outcome? Are there any thoughts that you've had while you've interacted and been a UN Goodwill Ambassador as well, that can allow for this tactics to become more towards collective and less towards individual?
I guess the systems that we build around us do not allow for us to be, unfortunately, it does not allow for us to be as environmentally conscious as we would hope to be,
Yeah.
Like you mentioned about the leaders flying in over there. The thing is that at the end of the day, they cannot fly commercial airlines.
Yeah.
And it's very important for them to sit together and meet because even though online meetings and all of that stuff, it is useful to a certain extent. They're mainly useful for follow-ups and things like that. But you have to make these bonds, you have to make these friendships, and that can only happen in person.
True.
We are also doing this interview in person for the same reason.
Yeah.
So I think that becomes really important, and it's very, very unfortunate that there's a massive, massive carbon footprint associated with it. I also feel guilty of it all the time because I do these concerts which are for the environment and concerts which are encouraging everybody to take individual action, sometimes concerts to world leaders to take action at a global level and speaking to them emotionally through the language of music. But then again, there's electricity usage for these concerts. I have to fly to the concert venue. Of course, I fly commercial. But the thing is that all of these carbon... but all of these carbon footprint issues are there. So it's a very difficult situation. That's all I can say. Do I have a solution for it? Absolutely not. But that's the way that the world is built around us. Because in the past, when we built all of these systems, like our previous generations and our generation, when we built all these systems, the paradigm was always that, that you throw a piece of plastic and it'll go somewhere, And, and you pollute the atmosphere through your industry or through your paper mill or through your tannery or whatever. The smoke is going to go somewhere, And you throw something, you throw a sewage into the river or into the ocean, it's going to go somewhere. But now it's only for the last maybe 40 or 50 years since the Stockholm Convention that we've suddenly started realizing that, these things are finite, It's a very thin atmosphere and the atmosphere is sort of getting filled up, And it's causing this thing known as global warming because, there is an unnatural amount of carbon in the atmosphere and because of that global temperatures are rising. It's the same thing with pollution and plastics that, we invented plastics as a miracle material because it could not be washed away and it was non-biodegradable. But somehow, we as human beings in the early 1900s, we decided that a non-biodegradable material is disposable.
Yeah.
And single use, which does not make any sense at all. Because if it's non-biodegradable, it has to be reused multiple times,
Yeah.
And then we decided that, okay, we're going to use it and throw it away. So, that what it translates to is that you eat a bag of chips, which takes you 5 minutes to eat, and the bag is going to remain on this planet forever.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with everything that you throw away. Like drink a bottle of water. It takes you like 30 seconds to drink that bottle of water, like one of the small bottles of water. And then after that, the bottle is on this planet forever.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. So now we are understanding, now we are slowly understanding that, what we were doing and the way that we were leading our lives was wrong. And now we have to make changes to policy. We have to make changes to the way we conduct our businesses, the way that we lead our lives. So that's what I believe that the COP, what's going to be really important is that, as you mentioned, that everybody needs to work together. And that's why everybody needs to meet in person. And second thing is that there needs to be a huge distinction between the global south and the developed nations. Because in a country like India or any country in the global south, not everybody in the country has got the facility of flicking on a switch and a light turns on. It's the developed nations that have that.
Yeah.
And even we have got our dreams, we've got our aspirations. We want a better standard of living. We want to achieve that status of everybody wants to have electricity. Everybody wants to flick a switch and a light turns on. Everybody wants to be productive after 6:30 in the evening. Everybody wants proper housing.
Yeah.
It's said that most of the buildings that need to be built in India by the year 2030 have not even been built. Like over 90% of them apparently. So everybody wants to have like proper houses. Everybody wants to have, everybody wants to have their villages or their towns to be accessible through roads to the bigger cities. Everybody wants to have access to airports and things like that.
Yeah.
So development becomes extremely important. And so we have to figure out how will the developed nations help the developing nations because we are not, the developing nations is not responsible for climate change. It's them who's responsible for climate change. We are just facing the worst effects of it.
Yeah.
And an unreasonable amount of effects, because of something that is not our fault at all. So basically, but at the same time, we need to figure out how are we going to go through all of that development in the most sustainable way possible. And for that, the whole world needs to work together. Another quick example I can give you is the rainforest in Amazon. Now, the whole world goes against Brazil for burning down the rainforests and deforestation and all of that stuff, and they should. Brazil should not be there should be a complete stop towards destruction of nature, and whatever remains should remain, and there should be a complete lock on that whole thing. But then again, the whole world keeps saying that Amazon is the lungs of the planet. They constantly keep saying that. So why isn't the planet contributing to it? So if there's lungs for the planet, then why isn't United States paying for the upkeep of the thing? Why isn't the United States or these large countries going to Brazil and telling them that, all right, what will it take for you to
stop doing that?
For you to stop doing this, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll give you whatever you want, but just stop doing it.
Yeah.
So that is what, and form a consortium for just this to ensure that the Amazon is untouched. But everybody wants to blame, but nobody wants to take the blame. And if you've got a minute, I'll give you another example.
Please,
Like for example, if you look at in 2020, there was this very heartbreaking image. There was this very heartbreaking image that at the beginning of the pandemic of this pregnant female elephant who died while standing in Palakkad district of Kerala. She was standing right in the middle of a river, and she was dead while she was standing up, and she was found to be pregnant. Now, it was a heartbreaking image. It was published by pretty much every single newspaper everywhere in the world. And the story behind it is that there was this female pregnant elephant. She wanders out of the forest in search of food. She goes to farmland, and over there she eats a pineapple. And little did she know that the pineapple was filled with explosives. It fatally damages the mouth. She wobbles away through the district to the river. She stands in the middle of the river and she dies while she's standing. Of course, there were knee-jerk reactions from armchair activists across India that that farmer should be hung upside down, should be beheaded, should be flogged, should be put in prison for life, and the farmer should be punished for whatever they did. But at the same time, we as city dwellers, as I mentioned earlier, we live in our own bubbles. If we do not have electricity for 3 minutes, we are so inconvenienced. If there is a new iPhone that comes out or a new gadget that comes out and it's out of stock, we immediately feel that why can't they make more of it? What's wrong with them? Why can't they make more of it and all of that stuff? And why can't it be available? And why can't it be available right now? So we don't think about where is all that coal coming from for our electricity. It's coming from digging up those forests of the elephant. Where is all that manganese, iron, cadmium, lithium, barium, tungsten coming from for making all those electronic gadgets that we consume on a daily basis and we keep throwing away? It basically comes from digging up the forest. So it's basically our city dwellers' consumption patterns, which is basically causing a destruction of the habitat and the food sources of that elephant. And the elephant has no other choice but to leave the forest for the food and going into a farmland. And the farmer has no other choice but to protect his or her livelihoods and the lives of his or her children. So he or she has to make that really painful and terrible and punishable offense of putting in those explosive fruits just to protect the lives of his or her families and livelihoods. And because of that, the elephant dies. So basically, instead of us putting blame on everybody, and that's what I hope happens at these COPs, that we should have a culture of stopping to put blame on other people when it comes to environmental issues and start looking inwards as to what can I do? In my own individual capacity. Can I consume less? Can I use less electronic gadgets? What can I do to prevent another elephant from dying?
No, that was a very powerful image. And the story is almost heartbreaking, right? When you go into understanding what just happened, because that's constantly, man versus the
human-animal conflict. That's what it is.
Major. And it's very difficult to take sides because, like you very rightly pointed out, there's empathy on both sides.
Correct.
And where do you then really say who is right and who's not?
Correct.
And you just have to find a balance within that.
Exactly.
I liked what you said about going inwards and, because we have a common connection in the way that you have interacted with Daji.
Yeah.
He was also, so PM Modi ji just came to Kana
Correct.
over the weekend.
Correct.
And,
And you were there, yeah.
Yes, I was there. And, we were, and one of the things that Daji spoke about, as you know, he's very passionate about the environment and, Kana Shantivanam is also sustainable. He spoke about thought pollution.
Yeah.
He said that, we talk about all kinds of, air pollution, water pollution, but the fact that it all emanates from us as human beings around greed, around all of the things that you spoke about. And therefore, we need to somewhere fix that
Correct.
for everything else to be in harmony.
No, true. Even Prime Minister Modi also said that. He once
Yes.
said that the ecological imbalances are a reflection of imbalances of the mind, which I find to be very, very true. Because at the end of the day, you brought out a very good point about what Daji had said, simply because at the end of the day, it's a problem with the value system. If you go right to the basics,
Yeah.
about kindness, about empathy, about compassion. And the biggest problem is that children are born with all of that. You know, like if you see a child basically is born with empathy, innate love for nature, innate love for green, innate love for animals. I've always said this, that if you have that you have a child, like maybe a 2-year-old or maybe a 1-year-old, you put the child in a room along with a apple and a rabbit. Okay, and you put a puppy dog along with a rabbit and an apple. The puppy will eat the rabbit and play with the apple. Whereas a human child will always cuddle with the rabbit and will eat the apple. So that is the way it is, because human beings are born with that compassion and that innate love for nature, love for animals, love for all species, love for all life. That is what it is. But the way that we've built our systems around us, the way that we've built our education system, we are systematically erasing that from our children.
Yeah.
We are systematically erasing all of these qualities of compassion and all of that stuff. So what we need to do is that we need to develop an education system where these qualities remain within our children.
Yeah.
Because children are never born with racism. Children are never born with hatred. Children are only born with love. They are only born with trying to adopt. And that's what they say when it comes to environmental concerns and climate action. Children are much faster at adopting the right practices, like doing away with single-use plastics, carrying a bottle everywhere, and ensuring that open spaces remain, planting trees, and and things like that. Children are once you erase it from them, and once you try to bring it back to them later on through teaching them songs or teaching them ideals or whatever, they rush back to it faster, because they do not have all these preconceived notions of what is good for the economy, what is good for what is more convenient, why there are no alternatives to things. They do not look at all of this. They just look at something that is wrong and they say, okay, it is wrong. Call a spade a spade,
Yeah.
And then they say, no, we cannot do this. We have to do something else, because this is just wrong,
No, to your point, even in Delhi, you know how the air pollution is. And in Diwali, it's mostly children telling their parents and also saying, I don't want to burst crackers because I can see and I've been taught in school what it's doing to nature. So I don't want to do it. And to your point about values, right? I think what you shared even earlier around how Indian heritage, I think we're all tuned as society. We were always tuned to keep reusing, save, fix things, don't throw them away.
Use and throw is completely a Western concept.
Yes.
It is 100% a Western concept, because everything for us has been about wearing the same clothes, just having a couple of clothes and wearing them again, washing them, reusing everything. Teacups are made out of mud, and even using less air conditioning, building homes which are innately more cooler and things like that. So that's how our culture was, But then, unfortunately, the things have changed.
No, the two things I find most ironic is when you hear about yoga from outside. Now, of course, thanks to Modi ji, it's more about our culture. And second is when they come and sell minimalism to us. And it's kind of very ironic. But, to wrap this up, I want to understand, how are you looking at your next year, your next 3 years, 5 years? What is it that you want to really achieve through your music? And also personally, what is the one mission that you are going to be really hankering on? I would love to know that.
No, but Milestones, it's a different story, because with Milestones, while growing up in India, growing up in Bangalore, making independent music, I could not even imagine that Grammy ever could be possible, right, in this lifetime. I would watch it on television and that was the end of it. And then winning my first Grammy when I was 33 and then winning another 2 more. So basically, for me, there are no more goals set for in terms of achieving, because at the end of the day, awards also, I look at it as always being a platform, because a lot of people say that, oh, I don't like winning awards and things like that, and, whatever. Of course, the end goal is never an award. But when I win an award, I'm extremely grateful for it, because each and every award is a platform for doing bigger and better things, especially if you've got a message through your music. So it's about reaching out to a wider audience and collaborating with more people, getting your voice heard better, and creating better music. So it gives you the opportunity for all of that. So it's just a platform. So for me, I think in terms of goals, when it comes to the environment and when it comes to nature, it's science at the end of the day. And when it comes to science, every day there are new findings. And every day the direction changes, as to what is the right way to do things and what is the wrong way to do things. We saw in the pandemic.
Yes.
First they said that, you're supposed to wear cloth masks. Then they said cloth masks are no good. And it's not because they were fickle-minded. It is because the science at one point was dictating something else and they realized, okay, we're wrong. So it would have been worse if they just stuck to their guns and said that no, cloth masks are better,
Yeah.
So that kind of a thing. So that's the beauty of science. The beauty of science is that you can admit that you were wrong, and you can say, okay, there are newer findings which are showcasing that that you have to do things differently, or what we previously thought to be right is actually wrong, and we have to look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. Like tobacco, for example. Tobacco was a medicine.
Yes.
Dentists used to use it to fill up cavities. They would extract a tooth in the 1800s and early 1900s. They would extract a tooth and they would fill up the socket with a couple of leaves of tobacco. And that was used as a painkiller. And then suddenly they started realizing that the incidence of buccal and mouth cancers are more prevalent with people who have visited the dentist. And then they realized the correlation that it's tobacco that is causing the cancer.
Oh, wow. I never knew that. Very interesting.
So that is what. And then science realized that, we've made a huge mistake over here. Same thing with carcinogens.
Yes.
Like every now and then you realize that something that we've been using regularly is a carcinogen. And, and then science dictates that, all right, whatever you've been doing is wrong. So it's the same thing with climate. So that's why it's impossible to have a goal. You just have to follow the science and figure out what is science dictating in terms of what is the narratives that needs to be told out, or how do we need to do things differently. And that's what when I feel strongly about something, I'm going to be making music on that.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So basically you're saying that, even if it's a message that you want to deliver, it has to be deeply rooted in science, because then is what makes it relevant and impactful.
And scientists perform an extremely important role of figuring out what is wrong and what are the solutions. But they are very boring people.
Yeah.
So they do not know how to communicate. If somebody in the public asks them that, okay, what can I do, for climate change or whatever, they'll show a whole lot of analytics and they'll show a whole lot of data and all of that stuff. And it's not going to change any mindsets.
Yeah.
So what is needed is for artists to collaborate with scientists and to communicate these complex ideas and thoughts through an emotional language where you're hitting the hearts and souls of people rather than, their heads and their minds, And only if you reach out to somebody emotionally, that is the only way you're going to be able to bring about behavioral change.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not rational thinking. It's always what resonates. And
Resonates, exactly.
Yeah, that's what brings the change. No, it was absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Wonderful talking to you too.
I just want to ask you one last question. I heard about, you had mentioned in one of your other interviews that, you've always struggled with ADHD. And, there are many people who almost take that as a handicap.
Yeah.
And, I've seen you've sort of almost converted it into a superpower. Anything that you want to sort of share on that? Because now, people tend to self-tag that I'm ADHD not one is that, and
correct,
I think
correct.
Second, it's almost as if when they tag themselves, then they take it as a way that they can avoid to do many normal things. But you, of course, have used it as a way for you to make your music much better.
I don't think I've used it, but the thing is that I've actually suffered through it quite a bit because while growing up, I was severely dyslexic and I would find it very difficult to read in school and to actually, to study and to get good marks and things like that. So much so that when I passed out of college, I swore that I'm never going to read a book again. So since the time I passed out of college when I was 24 till today, I've not read a single book because it's just too stressful for me to read it. It's so bad that I read about 2 or 3 lines. And then when I go to the 6th or 7th line and I come back to the first line, I realize it's something completely different. And so it's very difficult. But there have been coping mechanisms that I've realized through my life, like, using marker pens and, of course, the internet was hugely beneficial for me because reading stuff on a tablet or reading stuff on a computer screen, it helps me a lot because of the larger font and the additional stimuli of having pictures. Like when I was growing up, comic books was my friend. I used to love comic books. And that's why even with the education curriculum, I'm constantly pushing them, to make textbooks more inclusive, because as soon as you make textbooks look more like comic books, it immediately becomes inclusive to a wide variety of children. So I guess that these are the problems. But the biggest problem that I feel when it comes to ADHD and dyslexia is the unnecessary romanticism of it. Like, for example, and I believe that the Hollywood movie industry and Bollywood is absolutely responsible for this. Like, you have Tare Zameen Par. Sort of like they captured a couple of things right. I identified with a couple of things in the movie. But I think the biggest problem that they had with the movie is that they made the child win in the end, which I think was extremely irresponsible. Because immediately parents think that, all right, if I've got a child who is dyslexic or is at the autism spectrum disorder, then they must be some sort of a genius, which is not true at all. Because sometimes they just may be that, or they may have some sort of a genius ability which they will not figure out during their lifetime. Because the way it is that the more and more deeper you get into autism, the thing is, the more differently a person thinks from
regular folks.
A sort of perceived regular person. It's just that their brain is wired completely differently. That's the way that I look at it. I may be wrong, but that's the way that I've looked at it through my huge amounts of interaction and and understanding this. So sometimes you do not understand what they're going through, and they do not understand what you're going through, and there is a huge communication issue. So then you have films like Rain Man, where Dustin Hoffman is a person on the spectrum, and and he's like this mathematical genius. And then you have Zach Galifianakis in the comedy movie that is Hangover. He's obviously playing somebody on the spectrum. And then he's like this person who can count blackjack cards and all of that stuff. And then you have Forrest Gump also, again on the spectrum. And then he's this person who's a genius runner, and and he's an athlete. So I believe that this gives very unnatural expectations to parents when they see this, because automatically the first thing that even a common person thinks about when they say that, all right, this person's suffering on the spectrum, they're like, oh, then they must be a genius or whatever. And it's attributed to me too when the few people who know about this about me. And of course, people figure it out because of the way that I talk really fast. I'm very fidgety, a lot of hand movements, and things like that. And on stage also, it's very easy to find out that there is something off. But the thing is that for me also, people automatically attribute that, okay, he's a musician because of this. So I believe that one should not attribute it to that, because the thing is that
I did the same.
Yeah, it probably is not, and most probably is not attributed to just this. And plus, it just gives an unreal expectation to people who have family who are suffering from this.
And tell me then, what is an empathetic way to deal with someone like that, right?
Just be normal with them. That's it. I think just be normal with everybody, and just try to understand them. Just try to show an extreme amount of empathy. I think that's what is absolutely required.
No, but in schools, where like you get, I don't know about you, but I've seen like, when somebody is slow, when somebody is just different, you tend to just bully them, right? Because children in those ways are very brutal. You're not kind.
No, I've seen that in my school also. People were brutal with me, and then there were people, there was this other kid in my class who was in a more extreme form, and it was showcasing in many other ways, in verbal ways and things like that. So, and that kid was bullied a lot in school, so much so that he had to leave the school. So that I remember, and plus his mother also was in complete denial. Mother would come to school, and I remember being part of conversations where the mother would say that there's nothing wrong with my child, and it just needs to be taught and needs to be given time or whatever. And he's being very stubborn and things like that. And stubbornness is a part of the spectrum. Children who are dyslexic, people who have ADHD are usually very stubborn. I was a very stubborn child. I still am. So that's what. But of course you start having a little bit of self-realization, where you start realizing that, oh, I am being very difficult. I am being very stubborn. And you start realizing that it's because of a problem. And then you start trying to work against your instinct, You start working against your instincts so that you can remove that stubbornness, because a part of you is telling you you're absolutely right in what you're saying right now. There is no two ways about it. You're right, and you have to fight for it or whatever. And this other part is telling you that no, you will regret what you're doing right now. In a couple of days or in 1 or 2 days, you're going to regret that stance that you took, and you're going to feel like a complete idiot. And you're going to burn a bridge because of the way that you're behaving. So these are the conflicts that you have in your mind.
Like you just said you did with Stephen
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Where you were like, no, I'm just going to surrender. So it was actually, for you, a big battle, an internal battle where you were being, in a way, counterintuitive to yourself.
Correct,
but
because
still,
because some part of you is telling you that your instincts are good, and some parts are telling you that no, like, this is something that is absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
You're living in a society, and this is not the way to behave. So that's the thing.
and you felt that your parents somehow were better tuned to creating the
See,
right
my parents
environment.
never ever. I used to think it was denial with my parents, but then later on I realized that my parents did not want me to feel different, but they obviously knew. They
Yeah.
obviously knew.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing this, because very often we have people like that who we interact with on a daily basis, and I think very often we try to either categorize them, and we don't know how to be sensitive, even
Correct.
if we want to be, because we either don't have the right language,
Correct.
or we just don't know what appropriate behavior looks like, because
Correct.
either in society we've been told to just like shut them out
Yeah.
and not interact because we don't know the how. So thank you so much for sharing that. And very
No, but that's how humanity is, right? Humanity, everybody has to walk together, and because that's what differentiates us from animals. I do not think it is compassion that differentiates us from animals or anything like that. I believe that the only thing that differentiates us from animals is basically that we know how to walk together, and we have shunned this whole thing of survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, even me, my eyesight, I've got a power of 5.5, so I'm pretty much blind without my I'm pretty much blind without my contact lenses or without my glasses. Now, if I were to live in the animal kingdom, I wouldn't have survived a couple of weeks.
true.
So that's what my
No
own
food.
parents would have disowned me.
Yeah.
My own parents would have been like, this guy is not part of the flock and or part of the pack, because we cannot keep protecting him. He cannot see anything. He cannot hunt or whatever. So let's just go and leave him behind, And I would have probably starved to death or something like that. Same thing with, the spectrum or whatever. So that is the thing, we are allowing our bloodlines to be impure, as they say, which is a good thing, because I believe that every living being needs to have a chance. And what we as humans are doing is that we are providing that chance to everybody,
Yeah.
whether you've got a disability or whether, you've got, you're on the spectrum, or whether you've got an injury or whatever. We are giving everybody a chance. And I think we as humanity need to protect that extremely fiercely, where everybody needs to move together as one, and we cannot leave anybody behind.
So well said. I mean, so much strength in what you just shared,
Yeah.
because, when we move together, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a different kind of energy that we all create amongst ourselves.
And that's what makes us human. That's the only thing that makes us human, in fact.
Yeah. No, thank you. This has been a very enlightening conversation. I know even though you say you're an atheist, I somehow feel that there is so much that I have learned about human character, so much that I have learned about just life values, which I think hopefully, we all can imbibe and also learn from, because we've heard from you and how that has made you so successful. So hopefully that will act as an inspiration. But yeah, I'm going to keep tracking you and looking forward to much more music and many more awards, so that you can keep doing more impactful work. No, because like you said, it's a platform.
Yeah.
Many more millions of people will listen to you just by the mere fact that you're getting that validation.
Yeah.
That's how society runs.
Great.
So many more awards to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
you.